High Ambassador Larry of the Unified Stellar Concordat stood before the massive viewport, her four eyes widening at the sight before her. The human warship, Memory of Earth, hung against the backdrop of stars, its titanium alloy hull gleaming under the light of a distant sun. At nearly 4 kilometers in length, it was smaller than the Concordat's largest vessels, yet something about it commanded attention in a way Larry had never experienced before. "Magnificent, isn't she?" Captain Sarah Chen said, coming to stand beside the alien diplomat. The human captain's dark eyes reflected the starlight, and there was unmistakable pride in her voice. "Indeed," Larry responded, her translator struggling to convey the mix of awe and confusion in her harmonics. "Though I must admit, I find your species' insistence on naming warships rather peculiar. Most civilizations simply use designation numbers." Chen smiled, the expression somehow both warm and fierce. "Numbers are for inventory, Ambassador. Names are for remembrance." The captain gestured toward the great ship. "Every human vessel of war carries a name that means something. Memory of Earth was the first dreadnought we built after the Exodus, when we had to abandon our homeworld for nearly a century due to the great solar storm. She reminds us of what we lost, what we regained, and most importantly, what we learned about ourselves in between." Larry's secondary eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among her people. But surely such emotional attachment to war machines is inefficient. It could cloud judgment in tactical situations. A low chuckle escaped Chen. "That's what the Cretak Dominion fought too, right up until they faced the Spirit of Normandy at the Battle of Proxima. You see, Ambassador, when humans name a ship, we're not just labeling it. We're giving it a purpose, a legacy to uphold." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert. Red warning lights began pulsing throughout the diplomatic station, and Larry's sensitive skin detected the subtle shift in artificial gravity as defense systems engage. "Captain Chen," a voice crackled over the comm. "Long-range sensors detect multiple Ravager vessels entering the system. They're not responding to hails." Larry felt her throat sacs constrict with fear. The Ravagers were space-faring predators, mindless creatures that traveled in swarms, consuming everything in their path. Numbers and designations meant nothing to them. Chen's posture changed instantly, military training taking over. "How many?" "At least 30 carrier-class entities, Captain. They'll reach the station in under an hour." Larry's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. "That's enough to overwhelm the station's defenses 3 times over. We need to evacuate immediately." But Chen was already activating her neural link to the fleet command. "This is Captain Chen requesting immediate combat deployment of the Memory of Earth. Authorization code, Terra Invicta." "Captain," Larry protested, "even your impressive vessel cannot stand against such numbers alone. It would be suicide." Chen's smile returned, but now it held an edge sharp enough to cut vacuum. "Ambassador, let me tell you why we named her Memory of Earth. During the Exodus, humanity learned something crucial about survival. It's not just about having the biggest guns or the strongest shields. It's about remembering what you're fighting for and letting that memory become your strength." The massive dreadnought was already moving, its engines igniting like newborn stars. Additional panels along its hull began to shift, revealing weapon systems that had been carefully concealed during the diplomatic meeting. "When we name our ships," Chen continued, her voice taking on a teacher's patience, "we're not just being sentimental. We're giving them a story to live up to. Every crew member aboard knows what Memory of Earth means. They know about the billions who survived the great solar storm because they refused to give up hope. They know about the sacrifices made to preserve our species. And most importantly, they know that sometimes standing your ground isn't about winning. It's about giving others the chance to survive." Larry watched in astonishment as the human warship moved to intercept the Ravager swarm, its position carefully calculated to draw attention away from the station. The ambassador's scientific mind finally began to grasp something about human psychology that had eluded her people for generations. "You name your ships," she whispered, "because names have power." Chen nodded, her eyes fixed on the approaching battle. Names have power, memories have power, and sometimes, Ambassador, the difference between victory and defeat isn't in your weapon systems. It's in remembering exactly who you are and what you stand for. As the memory of Earth engaged the first wave of ravagers, Larry witnessed firsthand why humans had survived every calamity the galaxy had thrown at them. It wasn't just about technology or tactics. It was about the stories they carried with them, written in steel and fire across the stars. The battle that followed would become legend, and the name Memory of Earth would echo through the cosmos for generations to come, teaching both humans and aliens alike why some vessels deserve more than just a number. 3 months after the Ravager incident, Larry found herself aboard a different human vessel, one whose name had initially struck her as odd, Promise Keeper. It was smaller than the Memory of Earth, a swift cruiser designed for hit-and-run tactics, but its name carried no less weight among its crew. Commander Jack Reynolds stood at the tactical display, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic star map. "The Ravagers have adapted," he explained to the assembled Joint Task Force. "They're no longer just swarming. They're hunting specific targets: colony ships, medical vessels, civilian transports." Around the table stood representatives from 6 different species. The Meridian Alliance had finally acknowledged that the Ravager threat required a unified response. Larry noticed how the other aliens still seemed uncomfortable with serving alongside a human vessel, especially one with such a sentimental name. "Why do they call it Promise Keeper?" The Volteri representative, a crystalline being named Ixtal, asked what many were thinking. Surely Strike Cruiser 247 would be more efficient. Reynolds' expression softened slightly. This ship was named after an incident during the First Contact Wars. A human captain made a promise to a Centaurian colony that she'd return with supplies before their air recyclers failed. Her ship was destroyed making that run, but she managed to jettison the supplies in pods that reached the surface. Every single colonist survived. He touched a control, and the tactical display shifted to show their current mission parameters. "We name our ships after stories like that because every name is a lesson, a reminder of who we are and what we stand for." The mission was dangerous. A Ravager pack had cornered a refugee convoy near the Carina Nebula. Traditional military doctrine said it was too risky to attempt a rescue. The refugees would be considered acceptable losses. "Promise Keeper isn't just a name," Reynolds continued. "It's a statement of intent. When humans make promises, we keep them. We promised these refugees safe passage. We're going to keep that promise." The plan was audacious. While the other Alliance vessels would engage the main Ravager force, Promise Keeper would use the nebula's radiation to mask its approach, slip through the enemy formation, and lead the refugee ships to safety. Larry watched the human crew prepare for battle. There was something different about them compared to the methodical efficiency of her own people. They moved with purpose, yes, but also with a kind of fierce joy, as if the very name of their ship gave them strength. The battle began exactly as chaotic as expected. The Ravagers had indeed evolved their tactics, showing in cunning that made them even more dangerous. But as Promise Keeper dove into the nebula's swirling gases, Larry began to understand another aspect of human ship naming. "It's not just about history, is it?" she asked Reynolds as they navigated through the dangerous gases. "These names, they're promises in themselves." Reynolds nodded, his hand steady on the neural interface. "Every time we name a ship, we're making a promise to the future. We're saying, this is what humanity stands for. This is what we'll die to protect." The moment Promise Keeper burst from the nebula's cover, Larry witnessed that promise in action. The human vessel didn't hesitate, didn't calculate odds of survival. It simply did what its name demanded. It kept its word to those refugees. What followed was a display of piloting that would be studied in military academies for decades. Promise Keeper danced through the Ravager formation, its point defense systems clearing a path for the refugee ships, its electronic warfare suite confusing the Predator's targeting systems. Names have power, Reynolds said during a brief respite between attacks, because they carry weight. Every crew member aboard knows what it means to serve on a ship called Promise Keeper. We don't just fight for victory. We fight for what that name represents. When the last refugee ship jumped to safety, even the skeptical Volteri representative had to acknowledge that perhaps there was something to this human tradition. The Promise Keeper had lived up to its name, just as the memory of Earth had before it. As they limped back to friendly space, their hull scored by Ravager weapons, but their mission accomplished, Larry realized she was witnessing the birth of a new legend. The story of Promise Keeper would be told alongside that of Memory of Earth, and slowly the galaxy was beginning to understand why humans treated their ship names with such reverence. They weren't just names. They were promises, memories, and most importantly, they were guides for future generations, showing them what it meant to be human in a universe that often seemed devoid of meaning. The emergency alert caught Larry in the middle of writing her report on human military traditions. News traveled fast through the quantum networks. The human warship Thermopylae's Echo was making its last stand at the Perseus Gap, holding off an overwhelming Ravager force to buy time for the evacuation of 3 colony worlds. "Why aren't they retreating?" asked Ixtal, who had joined her research team after their experience on the Promise Keeper. The Volteri's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. Their combat algorithms must show the battle is unwinnable. Larry activated the tactical feed, watching as the lone human vessel faced down a swarm of Ravager ships. "It's the name," she said softly. "Thermopylae. It's from their ancient history." The human liaison officer, Lieutenant Maria Santos, nodded. Thermopylae was a narrow pass on Earth where 300 warriors stood against an army of thousands. They knew they couldn't win, but every minute they held the line meant more of their people could reach safety. The Thermopylae's Echo lived up to its namesake. Its captain, David Chen, Sarah Chen's brother, had positioned his ship in the only viable hyperspace exit point from the colony systems. The Ravagers couldn't bypass him without leaving their rear exposed to reinforcements. "This is madness," another alien observer muttered. "One ship against hundreds." "Watch," Santos said, her voice filled with pride. "Watch and remember." The battle that unfolded was unlike anything Larry had ever witnessed. The Thermopylae's Echo fought with a precision that seemed impossible, its weapons finding weak points in Ravager armor, its maneuvers using the gravity wells of nearby stellar bodies to maximum advantage. "How are they maintaining such coordination under that kind of pressure?" Tixtal asked, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. Santos touched a hand to the viewport. "Every crew member aboard knows what their ship's name means. They know about the 300 who died so others could live. History isn't just records to us, it's a guide for action." Hour after hour, the Thermopylae's Echo held the line. Its hull was breached multiple times, but emergency force fields snapped into place. Weapons were destroyed, but secondary systems came online. Through it all, Captain Chen's voice remained steady on the command channel. "Colonial evacuation at 60%, he reported. "We can hold." Larry noticed something strange in the tactical data. The Ravagers, they're learning, adapting their attacks to counter the ship's strategies. But the humans are also adapting, using methods that shouldn't be possible with their damage levels. Santos smiled grimly. "Names have power, Ambassador. When you serve on a ship called Thermopylae's Echo, you don't just learn about sacrifice. You learn about ingenuity in the face of impossible odds. The original 300 used every advantage their terrain offered. We do the same with space itself." The battle entered its 15th hour. The Thermopylae's Echo was now more debris than ship, but still it fought. Colonial evacuation reached 80%, then 90%. The Ravagers, perhaps sensing their prey's imminent collapse, launched a massive coordinated assault. "They need 10 more minutes," Santos whispered. "Just 10 more minutes." Captain Chen's final transmission was broadcast on all frequencies. "To all ships in range, the colonies are almost clear. Remember us. Remember why we stood." Echo, signing off. The Thermopyla's Echo made its final move then, diving straight into the heart of the Ravager fleet. Its reactor went critical in a carefully calculated detonation, the blast wave amplified by the precise positioning of wreckage from the hours-long battle. The explosion created a temporary disruption in local space-time, just enough to ensure the last colonial ships could jump to safety. In the silence that followed, Teleri understood something new about human ship names. They weren't just honors or memories. They were prophecies. By naming a ship Thermopyla's Echo, humans had created a self-fulfilling destiny. The crew knew what their name meant, what it demanded of them. And in their finest hour, they had lived up to every letter of it. "Now you see," Santos said quietly, "why we name our ships as we do. Every name is a lesson, a promise, and a guide. The Thermopyla's Echo died today, but its name will live on. Somewhere, right now, they're already laying the keel of another ship that will carry that legacy forward." Teleri looked at the tactical display, where the debris of the great ship still glowed. "They won't be forgotten," she said, and was surprised to find her voice trembling. "No," Santos agreed. "They won't, because that's another thing names do. They ensure we remember. And as long as we remember, they're never truly gone." The first alien vessel to adopt a human-style name was a Concordat battleship. After witnessing the sacrifices of Memory of Earth, Promise Keeper, and Thermopyla's Echo, High Commander Vexteri, Teleri's sibling, made an unprecedented decision. Their newest warship would be christened Last Light of Autumn. The human delegation at the naming ceremony tried to hide their emotion, but Teleri could see the pride in their eyes. Captain Sarah Chen, now promoted to Admiral after the Memory of Earth's legendary stand, stood as witness to the ceremony. "Why this name?" Chen asked Vexteri during the formal reception. "Of all the possibilities, why choose something so poetic?" Vexteri's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "On our homeworld, there is a moment at the end of our harvest season when the last light of day catches the falling leaves. It is beautiful, but it also heralds the coming winter. We chose this name because we finally understand what humans have known all along. A name should remind us of both beauty and duty." The opportunity to live up to that name came sooner than anyone expected. The Ravagers had evolved again, this time developing the ability to create localized space-time distortions. Their new tactics trapped ships in temporal bubbles where they could be picked apart at leisure. Last Light of Autumn was escorting a science vessel studying these new phenomena when they encountered a Ravager trap. The science vessel was caught in a temporal distortion, its crew experiencing time at a fraction of normal speed. Vexteri faced a choice that would have been simple before their exposure to human traditions: abandon the tracked ship and retreat with valuable intelligence about the new Ravager weapons. But the name of their ship carried weight now, demanding more than mere tactical efficiency. "Admiral Chen," Vexteri communicated through the quantum network, "we understand now why you name your ships as you do. The name becomes a compass, pointing to the right action even when logic suggests otherwise." The battle that followed demonstrated that the Concordat had learned more than just naming conventions from humanity. Last Light of Autumn used its advanced sensors to map the temporal distortions, creating safe corridors through the twisted spacetime. Like the last light breaking through storm clouds, Vexteri transmitted as they coordinated their attack. Like hope persisting even as darkness gathers. The Ravagers, encountering coordinated resistance that matched their own adaptive capabilities, found themselves outmaneuvered. Last Light of Autumn managed to extend its shields around the trapped science vessel, using precisely calculated energy pulses to disrupt the temporal bubble. Teleri, watching from a monitoring station, saw her own people beginning to understand what she had learned over the past months. The way the crew of Last Light of Autumn fought wasn't just tactically sound, it was inspired. They weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting to live up to their ship's name. As the rescued science vessel limped to safety, Admiral Chen made a point of personally congratulating Vexteri. "You've done more than save lives today," she said. "You've proven that the power of names transcends species." Vexteri's response was transmitted across all frequencies. "We name our ship for the last light of autumn because it reminds us that beauty persists even in darkness, that duty remains even when hope seems lost. Today, we lived up to that name." In the months that followed, more alien vessels began adopting meaningful names. The Volteri christened a new destroyer Crystal's Defiance. The Meridian Alliance named their flagship Dawn's Promise. Each name carried a story, a purpose, a legacy to uphold. Teleri updated her report on human military traditions, adding a new conclusion. The human practice of naming warships has proven to be more than cultural idiosyncrasy. It is a sophisticated psychological tool that enhances crew performance, unit cohesion, and tactical decision-making. More importantly, it provides a moral compass in situations where pure logic might lead to suboptimal humanitarian outcomes. As she watched Last Light of Autumn dock for repairs, its hull bearing the scars of battle but its name shining proudly, Teleri understood that the galaxy had changed. The humans hadn't just taught them how to name ships, they'd taught them how to infuse cold metal and circuits with meaning, purpose, and soul. 5 years after the first human warship revealed the power of names to the galaxy, the combined fleet of the unified species faced its greatest challenge. A Ravager nexus had been discovered, not just a swarm or pack, but the controlling intelligence behind their entire species' evolution. The assembled fleet was unprecedented. Ships from every spacefaring race, each bearing a name that carried meaning. At its heart, 3 vessels led the formation: the human dreadnought, humanity's faith, the Concordat battleship Last Light of Autumn, and a newly commissioned joint species carrier called Unity's Promise. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of Humanity's Faith, studying the tactical display where hundreds of named vessels waited for her command. Teleri, now serving as the fleet's sinological advisor, watched the human admiral's face. "They're all named now," Teleri observed. "Every ship in the fleet, even the Volteri, who once thought names were inefficient." Chen nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Because they understand now. Names aren't just words. They're bridges between what we are and what we aspire to be." The Ravager nexus had detected them. Massive organic structures began to unfold in space, each larger than a small moon. The enemy fleet numbered in the thousands, their ships now displaying tactical coordination that made their previous encounters seem like mere skirmishes. To all ships, Chen broadcast, her voice steady. "Look to your names. Remember why you bear them. Remember what they mean. Today, we make those names part of history." The battle that followed would be studied for centuries. Each ship fought not just with weapons and shields, but with the weight of its name behind it. Crystal's Defiance lived up to its title, its Volteri crew using crystalline technology to scatter Ravager targeting systems. Dawn's Promise led a wing of fighters that broke through seemingly impenetrable defenses. But it was Unity's Promise that demonstrated the true power of names. Its crew, drawn from every species in the Alliance, fought with a synchronization that should have been impossible across such different cultures and physiologies. They fought not just as a crew, but as a living embodiment of their ship's name. The Ravager nexus adapted quickly, its strategies evolving in real time. But for every adaptation, the named ships had an answer. Each crew drew strength from their vessel's identity, finding solutions that pure tactical algorithms would never have conceived. Last Light of Autumn took heavy damage protecting a wing of smaller vessels, its actions echoing its namesake's beauty and sacrifice. Humanity's Faith drove straight into the heart of the enemy formation, just as Memory of Earth had done years before. The battle's turning point came when Unity's promise discovered the Nexus's weakness, a vulnerability that could only have been spotted by the combined perspectives of multiple species working in perfect harmony. The kind of harmony that only came from serving on a ship whose very name demanded unity. This is why we named them. Chen transmitted as the fleet executed its final attack run. Not for glory, not for remembrance alone, but because names give us something to believe in, something to live up to. The Ravager Nexus fell not to superior firepower or advanced technology, but to the combined will of ships and crews who fought for more than victory. They fought for the ideals captured in their names. In the aftermath, as the fleet tended to its wounded and counted its losses, Larry completed her final report on human naming traditions. But instead of sending it to the Concordat archives, she transmitted it across all known space. We thought they named their ships out of sentiment, out of an illogical attachment to mere words. We were wrong. Humans name their ships because they understand something fundamental about sapient consciousness. We become what we believe ourselves to be. A ship named for courage becomes courageous. A ship named for unity unifies. A ship named for sacrifice stands fast when logic demands retreat. Today, looking at the victory we achieved together, I understand the final truth about human ship names. They never named their ships to remember the past. They named them to shape the future. And in teaching us this truth, they gave the galaxy something greater than tactics or technology. They gave us faith in the power of words to change reality itself. As the fleet began its journey home, the stars seemed to shine brighter on the names emblazoned on each hull. Each one a story, each one a promise, each one a bridge between what was and what could be. The galaxy had learned why humans named their ships, and in learning, had discovered something profound about itself. For in the end, it wasn't just about the names. It was about what those names represented. The eternal truth that belief, properly focused and sincerely held, could reshape the very fabric of existence itself.